Good morning once more, family. My name is Jerry, and I'm an addict. And what we're about to do is, and I've really always been confused with this. I don't know why we call these workshops. These things should be called help shops. I mean, you know, that's the deal with these, because this is where we get our experience, strength, and hope for our daily lives. And this morning, we're going to have a little help shop on Lost Dreams Awaken. And we have two phenomenal individuals sharing some experience, strength, and hope with us this morning. And without any further ado, I'd like to have Bob S. please come up and share his experience, strength, and hope.
Hey everybody, I'm Bob, recovering addict.
Hey Bob. Hey Bob.
Jerry said two phenomenal individuals, and I thought, well, I know Nikki's supposed to share. I thought I was going to. They must have somebody else up here. It's really a mini. I've always wondered about the, you know. In our readings, it says that we don't care how much you used, where you came from, what your connections were, what you've done in your past, how much or how little you have. But that's not true here. In a speaker meeting, you're exactly concerned about that kind of stuff. You want to know who the hell I am, where I came from, what I did, how I got to where I am. There's one other piece that you ought to want to know about, but you're not going to get that from me. You're going to have to get that from the people that know me. And that other piece is you really ought to want to know whether I actually do what I'm going to tell you. You know, I learned from the very beginning by watching. I learned from a very young age you pay a lot more attention to what people do than what they say. You know, we'd go out in public, wonderful little kids were, and then we'd get in my car and she'd smack the shit out of us for not moving fast enough, you know? There was a mismatch there, and so I learned at a very young age, pay attention to what people do, listen to what they say, but also pay attention to what they do. So I'm going to tell you some things about what I've done, but my encouragement to you is show up at my freaking home group, talk to my wife, talk to my daughter, talk to the people who know me and find out whether or not I really do this stuff. I'm going to do my best to tell you the truth. You know, I mean, when I talk about shit that happened 30 years ago, 40 years ago now, I'm doing the best I can with it, but there might be some inaccuracies. there might be some embellishments. I try to tell you, I don't remember where the hell this came from, but sometimes I might. That's just the way that this stuff works the longer you stay around. I really, really enjoyed listening to Lisa and Jacob in that last workshop. Holy shit. If you weren't here for that workshop, the CD's worth getting. They were really good, both of them. And one of the things they talked about was how awkward it was being a young person when old fucks would come up and say, they didn't say old fucks, that's me, I'm sorry. But they said when older people would come up and say, oh, it's so wonderful that you've gotten it so young. And they were talking about, you know, how they responded, and I was sitting in here and I was thinking, you know, my thought always was, it's not my fault that you waited so fucking long to get it, you old fuck. But that's not true. You know, everybody's got to go through what they've got to go through, and a lot of people don't get it, and I don't know why that is. Lost Dreams Awaken, and I've definitely had some. As a foundation, let me tell you, any of the other older folks in here who remember that TV show, Leave It to Beaver, where the mom was perfect and the dad was understanding, and it was always the brother that got him into trouble. My family was absolutely nothing like that whatsoever. My family was more like the one called the Munsters or the Addams family, okay? You just never knew what kind of crazy shit was going to go on, okay? And there have been times in my recovery where I have read this statement in the basic text about Lost Dreams Awakened, or heard people, and I've sat there at times and kind of scratched my head because the most prominent dream that I had growing up was that I wouldn't have to be scared to death of what was going to happen next. That's just the way it was when I grew up. I always felt out of place. I always felt uncertain what was going on. I never knew what was going to happen next. And at about 14 years old, I went to a drama club party. I joined the drama club. I had tried to be in sports. I couldn't be in sports, didn't fit in. I was a little scrawny-ass kid. And I joined the drama club, and we were putting on our first play. And we put on our first play, and we had this cast party on a Friday night. It was in the wintertime. It was snowing outside. I even remember the teacher's name, Miss Chapman. She was our director. We went to this party, and somebody brought in these couple of big boxes of Boone's Farm, Strawberry Hill. High-class stuff. Somebody handed me a bottle and said, try this. They didn't hand me a glass. They handed me the bottle.
Come on.
The next thing I knew, I was waking up in my bed at home, and I felt like shit, and my mother was yelling at me, as usual, telling me I had to get the hell out and get to school. And I got to school, and people were laughing and saying, oh, you were so funny, you had such fun. And I got the story that somehow they found me out in back of the house laying in the snow yelling that the boogeyman was after me. But you know what? Nobody ever came and talked to me before. Nobody ever said I was funny. Nobody ever paid attention to me in school unless it was time to beat up on Bobby, which is what they called me. And one of the reasons I can't stand being fucking called Bobby, please don't ever call me Bobby. You know what karma is, right? But this was different, and I thought, wow. All of a sudden, I felt part of. All of a sudden, I didn't feel like I stuck out so much. You know, all of a sudden, people were paying attention to me in a different way. And I was off to the races. From that point on, my story with using is probably not much different from any of y'all's. The only thing worth mentioning was that in those days, if you did drugs, it meant that you were probably a pedophile and a rapist, and it just didn't happen in the town that I came from up in Massachusetts, a little bitty conservative-ass town up in Massachusetts. So my thing at the time was, as somebody said at the beginning of the meeting, liquid dope, which was still illegal because I was under the age of 21, as Lisa pointed out earlier. The Navy had the nerve, after some incidents like with machinery falling out of trucks and flower pots falling downstairs on top of people and stuff. And I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's all it was, I swear to God. But they actually told me that I was an alcoholic. And I said, you're out of your friggin' mind. And they said, you're alcoholic, and if you drink one more drink, we're going to send you to the drunk farm. Now, this was in Guam, and this was during the windup of Vietnam. And this was when 55-gallon drums of fuel oil were full of fuel going one way, but they were full of other stuff coming back. And we were the first stop and off point for that. So I said, fine, screw you. I'm just going to start smoking dope instead. And I very quickly found out it didn't make any difference. I made some attempts to try and control it. I found out over the course of years that nothing I could do would work. And by the grace of God, and my first day clean in Narcotics Anonymous was August 13th, 1979. And, you know, over the years, I have watched some folks come in, not get it, go out and relapse. And I've heard stories from people. I've heard them say, oh, well, of course they didn't stay clean. Look what they were doing. They were doing this, and they were doing that, and they really didn't want it, and they weren't serious about it. And on one hand, I have paid attention to what people who relapse do because I don't want to do that. But on the other hand, I got to tell you that one of the things that has been impressed upon me over the years has been, I have no fucking idea why people who don't get it don't get it. I don't know. They didn't want it. They wouldn't have been showing up to start with. I don't buy this that they weren't serious about it, because I've seen them do things that they wouldn't have done if they weren't serious about it. And that's scary. It's much easier to say, oh, well, it's their own fault. If they wanted to stay clean, they would have. That's a lot easier. But I just haven't seen any evidence of that. The evidence I've seen is different from that. The evidence that I've seen is, I need to do every goddamn thing I can to stay clean, and then I still have to hope that it's the right thing. And I can't tell you, really, I can't. The only thing I can tell you, I think, about why I've been able to stay clean this long has two things. One, I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever that I'm an addict. I did an unbelievably thorough first step. There is no doubt. When people come in and say, you know, it'd be nice to be able to do this. Because in my mind, there's a very clear connection between using and all of the bad shit that happened in my life, all of the loss of control, all the unmanageability. But let me get back on track here. When I was growing up, the dream was just to be safe. But then as I got clean and as I stayed clean, there were some other dreams that came around. There was the dream of being able to fit in with sports and have some success and contribute and be a team member kind of thing. There were some dreams as far as school went, too. I sucked at school, partly because I was scared to death somebody was going to be beating me up at any moment, partly because I was scared of what was going to happen when I got out of the classroom, partly because I was scared of what was going to happen when I got home. There were a lot of reasons, but I didn't pay a lot of attention in school, and I always heard this from the teachers. I know he can do the work. and they'd always sit there and say, what the hell to say to him, for Christ's sakes? I never flunked a grade. I never got held back, but I was always right on the edge. I had to go to summer school a couple of times. I always got told I was an idiot and a dumbass and would never amount to anything as I was growing up, and I kind of believed that. And when it got to be 16 years old and old enough to quit school, and I wanted to have a girlfriend, and my mother tried to say, no, I couldn't have that particular girlfriend, I finally said, fuck you, packed my stuff, and left in the middle of the night. Without leaving notes. And that's when my using really took off bad. There was no checks on it. And I found out real quickly I couldn't go to school anymore, so I quit. And then I couldn't make any money to get what I wanted to get, and so I ended up forging my name on the paperwork to join the Navy. I was a high school dropout. I was lucky enough to trade with the military. I was a radioman, and then they sent me to school to be a teletype repairman. And I did a lot of using there. After I got clean, when I was getting ready to get out of the Navy, as a teletype repairman, I don't know if any of you guys know what a teletype is. Some of the older folks might remember them. They were in the news. They used to bring up the news broadcast, right? And it was in the background, clickety-clacking. These were like really fancy-ass typewriters. They converted electrical signals over the radio waves into mechanical movements so that you could pass messages. And the military relied on them. The news services everybody relied on them. 1980, I was getting out of the military. I had like 9 months clean. And the Teletype Corporation in Richmond, Virginia offered me $25 an hour for a job, which was phenomenal. And I went to a meeting, and I went to my sponsor, and I said, this is awesome. I mean, I feel like I should do this, but I don't really know that I want to do it. And through talking about it in meetings and thinking about it and talking to my sponsor about it, here's the decision that I came to. I decided my recovery and my ability to be alive is a gift from God, and what I do with myself and with my talents as a result of that needs to be my gift back. I didn't take the job. I studied for my GED, and I got my friggin' GED. When the scores came back, I got to tell you, I thought they made a mistake because they were like really solid passing scores on the friggin' thing, and I thought, they goofed, something's wrong. But no, I got my GED. So I got out of the military, and for the next probably 4 or 5 months, racing tickets that the supermarket gave away, and you were supposed to tune into the TV to see if you had the winning number. And I'd usually make $2, $4 a ticket, and I'd go collect them out of the baskets that people had left because I was in school full time. I decided I was going to go get an associate's degree. I went to Tidewater Community College in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And I actually did good. And I enjoyed it. And I did pretty good. And I got a job working in where? Treatment, of course. But, I was lucky, and I don't know where the hell this came from. I was pretty lucky. Somebody warned me in advance. They said, if you want to go work in the treatment field, be damn sure it's because of what you have to offer, not because you want to get back. because that is not where you get your recovery. They warned me in advance. They said, if you're working in treatment, it's a drain on your recovery. It's a problem looking at people that you're supposed to be in a professional role with, and you have no business mixing those roles. And you also have no business sharing information that you learn about people in treatment. So don't do it because you think there's something in it for you. Do it because you think you have something to give. So I started working in the treatment field. And I started working on my bachelor's degree. I got my associate's degree. Passed with flying friggin' colors. I think I ended up with a grade point average of like 3.86, 3.88. I don't know how the hell that happened. Actually, I do. What I did was, I don't think I'm particularly bright. I think that I just work really hard. I would go to class, I would do all the friggin' homework, I would sit up till 2 o'clock in the morning reading the books and underlining shit, and I just worked my ass off, you know? It was important to me, what had been so freely given to me in many ways other than just in the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous. Not that there wasn't a lot there for me to give back, and I've been involved in area service and regional service, and I've been involved in conventions, and I've done a good bit of service work, and all of that is good and helpful, and I enjoy doing that, but I still wanted to do something more. I started working on a bachelor's degree after getting the associate's degree, and I got waylaid by marriage and kids, and really what happened was I wasn't that far along in my recovery yet. I still had a lot of learning to do. Here's the image that I have about recovery that has been helpful for me. I don't know where the hell it came from. I can't tell you it came from a sponsor or this person. I don't know, but it's somewhere along the line. One that I really come into recovery. Our lives are like this huge friggin' mansion with some 1,000+ rooms in it, and every single one of those rooms is friggin' trashed. And when we come into recovery, what we do is we start cleaning up one room at a time. And unfortunately, not everybody starts with the same room, and not everybody goes to the next same room. Some people go up to the 5th floor, and some people go to the 13th, and some people go to the 1st floor. Some people like playing in the playpen for a while. Some want to work in the pool. And everybody has their own path with it, you know? So it's not up to me to decide or judge somebody's recovery based upon what I'm saying. Maybe they're just spending more time in a room that I haven't spent yet. That's just the way that it's gone. So one of the rooms that I needed to clean up was relationships, and first one lasted a year, year and a half. Second one lasted about a year. Third one lasted about 2 years, because it took me a while to get the divorce. Being honest. The fourth one, I don't know. The fourth one, I'm coming up on 18 years. I think I figured it out this time. And the neat part of that, and talk about that, and you know, that's one of the lost dreams awakened. I mean, I sure as hell didn't want what I saw growing up between my mother and father, my mother and my stepfather. I didn't want any part of that. You know, they friggin' leached off of each other, you know? They didn't help each other. They just sucked the life out of each other. And then they got mad when one didn't have anything left to give. And it took me a while, you know. My first couple of relationships, I didn't realize that me taking care of them meant that I was going to be responsible for them, and that would piss me off after a relatively short amount of time. Why don't you go do this shit for yourself? Don't ask me when I'm the one that said, hey, come on, I'll help you and I'll do this stuff for you. It took a while to learn that. The relationship that I have today is unbelievably different. It's unreal. It's a lot more than I deserve. Who said yes? Andrea. That's bias. Thanks. Thank you. Remember that karma thing? Right. It's not. After I got a little bit more stable, they came up with this thing that they were going to license substance abuse professionals in Virginia. I was involved in a professional association, which was really weird. Because, I mean, I knew who I was. They didn't, for Christ's sakes. And they were acting like I was pretty good and stable and helpful and a respectable member of society. And man, that has taken, it still feels weird sometimes, you know, with these professional groups, because they don't know who the hell I am or who I was. But anyway, the licensure thing is what made me say, okay, I need to go get my bachelor's degree, because there's no way they're going to license somebody with less than a bachelor's degree. And when I got in school and got back into school and got working on the bachelor's degree, man, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. A little foreshadowing here. I'm not in the treatment field anymore. I don't work in recovery in that way anymore. And one of the reasons, which is probably neither here nor there, but one of the reasons is when I was doing it, maybe it's changed now, but when I was doing it, it was primarily people in recovery, or not, which was a lot worse, who came in and tried to tell people what they should be doing based on what they thought was right without any fucking evidence at all, other than their own personal experience, which has its place in here and is unbelievably valuable in here. But it's entirely different when somebody stands up there and has that authority over you and says, you should do this. And they don't know for sure that it works. They don't have any friggin' evidence. That scared me. And that was one of the things that really intrigued me in school. I started learning about research. I started learning how to do research. And I got tired of being told what to do by people who really didn't know as much about this stuff as I did. And that got me fired up, and I got accepted and get a master's degree in psychology. And I loved it. And I got in there, and I was scared to death, and did well. I did well. I couldn't believe it. And I finished the master's degree, and it didn't take long before, again, I was feeling the itch. I wanted to do something a little bit more. I still saw areas where I could do things, where I wanted to do things and make contributions. But because I didn't have a PhD, it just wasn't going to happen. I wanted to do research. I wanted to do teaching. And you can't do that with graduate programs unless you have a doctorate. So I took a leap of faith and I applied to a bunch of PhD programs. And then I sat back and waited anxiously to see what was going to happen. And my wife remembers this. This was a tough time. One of the universities that I'd applied to. And I'd get all excited. I'd go inside and open it up, and it'd say, "We regret to inform you." Every fucking one of them. "We regret to inform you." And I was really crushed, and I really thought, okay, maybe this is just not what I'm supposed to do. But I thought about it some more, and I looked at what I did, and what I had done, of course, was I had applied to all the top universities, all the wonderful places to go where they had 300 friggin' people applied, and they only took 2 per year, okay? So I decided, okay, I'm going to try this one more time. I went ahead and applied one more time, and this time I got out the book that tells you what the acceptance rate is at each and every university. And I applied to some of the top ones that I wanted, but I also specifically applied at some of the ones with 10% acceptance rate. Because you know that the person who graduates at the top of their medical school class is called a valedictorian, right? And a doctor. Yeah, he said, you know what they call the person who graduates at the absolute bottom of the class? Doctor. It matters to get in and get the piece of paper. It really doesn't matter which school, you know? So I applied to a bunch of different places. And this time, I got 3 interviews. I got interviews in Richmond, Virginia, St. Louis, and Jackson, Mississippi. Yeah. And my wife right away says, I ain't going to Jackson, Mississippi. You forget that shit. So I said, well, you know, I'll go just to see what it's like. It'll be good practice for the other ones. And I really liked the program. They were doing good stuff. And so went to the other 2, and I got offered a place from, oh, that's the little alarm. Oh, Nikki, it vibrates. It doesn't make a noise. Warning, because Nikki's going to use the alarm. Anyway, tangent, sorry. I went to Jackson State University. I met unbelievably wonderful people in Jackson, Mississippi. I absolutely loved the recovery community there. Neat people. And the PhD programs, for those of you who don't know, are supposed to last for 5 years, and it's not unusual for people to take 6 or 7 to complete. Fuck that. Remember that hard working stuff? I was done with my academics in 3 years, got my dissertation done while I was on internship, graduated after 4 years. I am now licensed. It's way cool, I gotta tell you. I'm licensed in both Mississippi and Louisiana. It's just unbelievably cool. I get to go into courtrooms and testify and walk home and go home at night. You know, the judge and the DA and the bailiffs and everybody offer me coffee and shit when I come in. They say, "Here, doctor, come on over here." It's unbelievable. It's just really cool. And it's also really nice because I'm getting to do exactly what I wanted to do in a way that I never dreamed I'd be able to. I was a fucking high school dropout. I constantly heard that I was a dumbass and wouldn't amount to anything and couldn't do anything. Jesus Christ. And you know, all I can tell you about how all of this has happened, and there's the doctor thing, there's the marriage thing, there's a family thing. Probably the area of my life that I feel the worst about is how I have been or not been a father to my children. I'm very disconnected with most of my children. They've slowly been coming back a little bit at a time, and I had to go through hell with a stepdaughter who hated my guts at first and is now in recovery, and that I have an absolutely wonderful relationship with. And it's phenomenal. I don't believe it. I don't know how that happened. All I know is I've come into recovery, I've stayed clean, I've worked steps, I've tried to be as honest as possible. I've come into these rooms and I've shared the good stuff and I've shared the bad stuff, and I've been real direct in my life. You've been able to find me sitting in a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. The best times of my life, you've found me sitting in a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. You guys are my family of choice and provided me with the support and the growth and the guidance that I never had growing up. And it's allowed me to move from here and go do some unbelievable things. And I'll close up with this statement that I think is absolutely true. The fact that I now have 32 years clean, I think, that I'm a PhD, that I'm a freaking doctor, that I have a wonderful wife, family, that I'm able to do wild things that I never dreamed of before. Really, all of that shit is not a reflection at all of me. It's a reflection of Narcotics Anonymous and what can happen if
And now we're going to have time for another speaker to come up, and we would love you all to welcome Nikki N from Jackson, Mississippi.
I'm Nikki, I'm an addict. You know, I came in earlier and manipulated Bob into going first. And now I think I regret it. I don't know which one's harder, going first or following Bob. Thanks, Bob. I have a lot in common, actually. I was raised by wolves before I got clean. And, you know, when I was little, you know, I was raised by addicts. And I learned that lifestyle from them. And so when I was little and I thought about what I wanted to be when I grew up, anything but like my mama. You know, honestly, that's what I thought when I was a child. But somehow as I grew up, I forgot that the reason she was like she was because she did drugs. And I tried them, like we do, like my son's doing. Fun. And I think I tried drugs the first time when I was 13, and I didn't act like my mom, so I thought I wasn't going to be a drug addict. And so I tried them again. And I did that for a while, and it was manageable. So my disease told me that I was not a drug addict. And around, I moved out, moved on my own when I was 14. You know, because I'm really good at making good decisions. And I moved out on my own. So by the time I was 16, I was pregnant. By the time I was 17, I had a baby and a stepson who was 5. And I was married, because that's what you do in the South, right? You get married to the idiot that you, that's right, rock on. Because my grandma taught me better, you know, and she told me that I was going to get married. There wasn't any question about it, so we got married. And, you know, I used through that, and I can't blame any of that on the drugs. You know, that was my core personality, was diseased, with or without the drugs. And so, you know, I had a lot of dreams, and one was, as a child, I wanted to be secure, you know, and not feeling in the pit of my stomach that fear. You know, I didn't want to, I just wanted to be okay, you know, and so that's what I was always looking for, you know, and so anyway, I married this guy, and I finished high school by the skin of my teeth. And I had this lady that in high school, her name was Beverly, and she probably lives here. I wish I knew her last name. I actually graduated from Biloxi High. But anyway, her name was Beverly, and she was a teacher at my school, and she really was a mentor to me. And she told me, don't quit, don't, you know, just because you had this baby, don't take a break, go to school, go to college. She helped me fill out, you know, paperwork for grants and stuff, and I did that. And when I was little, I was raised by foster parents, and you know, I called them Mama and Papa because they were so old. They were like my grandparents. You know, they were in their 70s when I was. You know, my grandpa would work in the yard and tear up his knuckles and do all the stuff. So I used to Band-Aid him up. You know, and he'd tell me, you should be a nurse when you grow up. And I wanted to do that. You know, because I like taking care of him. And so anyway, I'm one of those lucky people who kind of always knew what they wanted to be. Not a drug addict, and a nurse. And so. She mentored me. This lady was a nurse, and I went to nursing school and I graduated, and that's when my disease really took off, because now I was not old enough to purchase alcohol, but I could medicate you, and they put me in charge, you know, and that was like a lot of my identity was wrapped up in work, and I was, everybody was so proud of me, and look what you did, and you were raised by wolves, and you didn't quit school, and you know, and this sort of, you know, ego took over, and my disease took off, and I used a lot. I used a lot of everything. I used a lot of money, and you know, I used a lot of that ego at work, being in charge and that sort of thing, and that quit working. And one day I found my drug of choice, and that worked. And it almost took away everything I ever wanted in life. You know, I almost lost my career, you know. I almost lost the privilege of being what I always wanted to be when I grew up. And you know, when I came into recovery for the first time, I was a lifeless, gray, swollen, miserable, pessimistic, narcissistic, unemployable shadow of a person, really. And I went to my first meeting of Narcotics Anonymous in Gulfport, and you know, I wasn't ready to get clean, but I heard the message of recovery. Like, I had been to other meetings, you know what I'm talking about, and I spent most of the time in there thinking about how different I was from the people who were there, and not really relating to them, and that was not their fault, that's my fault, but that's what I did. And so sometimes I think when I share my story, you know, it's easy for people to, I go to do H&I at Whitfield, and I think that the girls there probably think like, whatever, you know, if you had used like I used, you wouldn't be able to stay clean either, because that's what I used to think, you know, that I couldn't stay clean because you didn't suffer from the disease that I had. Anyway, I tried to get clean, and like I guess, you know, I guess I didn't quite believe that all drugs were a problem. Certainly I could, I mean, how can you be from South Louisiana and not have a beer with a po' boy? I mean, you know, that can't happen. So the scary part about that is the first time I left treatment, I believed I would never use again. Like I believed with all of my heart that I never wanted to use again, and I believed that I was an addict, and I did it anyway. And again, I found myself in treatment, and I was terrified because everything I had done to not end up like my mom, I was turning out to be just like my mom. And so I was in treatment the second time, and the Mississippi Board of Nursing told me that I couldn't come back to the Gulf Coast if I wanted to work. And I remember at the time being furious and saying, you don't get to tell me where to live. And they said, you're right, but we get to tell you where to work. And if you want to work, you're not going to move back to the Gulf Coast. And so I found some acceptance because I really did love being a nurse, and it's weird for me to talk about that up here. And my identity was so wrapped up in what I did for a living that it was years before I would tell anybody in recovery what I did, because I wanted to not be a nurse. I want to be me. I want to be a mom. I want to be a recovering addict, And anyway, so they said, you can't move back to the Gulf Coast. And so I started trying to find a job in Jackson. At this point, I had been fired from my last job. And imagine that, nobody wanted to hire me. I was like damaged goods, I might as well have been wearing a scarlet letter on my chest when I went for interviews. Nobody wanted to hire me. And I was still in treatment because this time they weren't going to let me out after 42 days. And, I was in this treatment center where you got to drive your car to interviews and, be like a real person and stuff. And I did that. And the only time you got to leave the treatment center by yourself is if you had an interview. So I went on lots of interviews because, it was the only time I could get away from it. So, I went on my 42nd interview where they told me that I should come back when I could administer narcotics like all the other nurses that worked there. And I was driving home to the treatment center where I lived in the car that was about to be repossessed. And I remember, I can't remember the name of the song because I suck at remembering stuff like that. But, this song came on the radio, and it was just a beautiful day in May in Jackson, Mississippi, and the blue sky was blue, and it was beautiful. And I remember saying, God, if you're out there, man, I need a little help. And, if you ever see fit to give me another job. At this point, I wasn't just applying for nursing jobs. I worked at Wendy's here, the one that got torn away by the hurricane. That was my first job. I applied at Wendy's. I applied at, I used to work at a grocery store for years. I did. I worked in this grocery store. I was like a professional grocereteer, and so in Jackson, there was this chain of grocery stores that had just come up when I moved there, and it was called Brookshire's. And I was like, oh, I can get a job at Brookshire's because I know how to do all this stuff. And they didn't want me either because they were looking at my application why would you want to work here? So they didn't want me either. So I'm completely unwanted. I can't find a job doing anything. My car's about to be repossessed. The only reason I didn't get that car repossessed because they didn't know I was where I lived at treatment. And so anyway, I just remember looking through the windshield at the sky and saying, God, if you're out there, if you ever see fit to give me another job, I will honor and respect it. I will do the best that I can at that job, and I won't think that I deserve it like I did. When I got fired for passing out at work, up until that point, I probably got a little bit of humility after that happened, but not much. But that job hunt that, I kept getting rejected, I gained some humility from that. And anyway, long story short, I got offered a job, and it was in nursing, and I was scared because, as much as I loved being a nurse, even though, that's what I grew up wanting to be, I was ready to give it up if that's what I had to do to stay clean. I hear people say stuff like, you can't, work in the bar, and, you can't be the bartender, or whatever the hell that quote is. How are you going to be a nurse and stay clean if that's where you stole drugs from and all that kind of stuff? And I was like, that ready to get clean. If it meant that I didn't need to do that anymore, then fine. Just please let me stay clean because I can't live like this. And anyway, I got this job, and I took it, and I was afraid. And I shared about it in meetings I had. And I shared about not being sure what I was supposed to do when I grow up, except for wanting to stay clean. And so I took that job, and I kept going to meetings, and I got a sponsor, and I worked steps. And funny thing is, this old bastard in my home group one day, like, made me be the alternate GSR. Like, I don't know how that happened, but like suddenly I was the alternate GSR. I probably had like 6 months clean, you know. So then I knew everything because I was in charge. So anyway, because I think he was like the GSR, but he was hunting all the time. So like, you know, I had to take up his slack. So then I was the GSR, you know, and then I did some stuff at area, and then a convention came, and Pixie and Bob were there, and because of hurricane, and then a couple years later, I was the chair of a convention, Mississippi Regional Convention, you know, and because of the skills and the patience that you guys taught me, I've been able to advance in my work in management. I really absolutely link that completely to what I've learned in Narcotics Anonymous. Learning how to compromise with a bunch of drug addicts, you know, has made me a more employable person. And anyway, so I got that job, and I'm still at that job. You know, God willing, in June of next year, I'll have been there 10 years. And so, like I said, you know, from the leadership skills I learned in Narcotics Anonymous, I was offered a job in management there, and I took it. And then I had a lot of money, you know, because I have money issues. And so I always work extra jobs, you know, so I have like extra jobs. And so one of my extra jobs was working on the weekends for an infectious disease doctor making rounds. And I remember how much I like taking care of patients. You know, I missed that. And so I started thinking about being a nurse practitioner, you know, kind of leaning towards that, because they're making some new laws now, and they're, you know, trying to make it a doctor level program. And so I was thinking, if I'm going to do that, I need to go ahead and do that. And so I started investigating those things. And, you know, of course, talking about dreams reawakening, when I graduated nursing school, I had got an associate's degree. And at that time, I thought, by the time I'm 25, I want to be a nurse anesthetist. You know, I want to put people to sleep. So now I'm like 26. And I still don't even have a bachelor's degree. So I started, you know, I talked to my sponsor about it. I was defaulting student loans. I still hadn't started paying my bills yet. So I was defaulting all these student loans. And so, you know, we put together a plan of how would I go back to school. And so this was in like 2005. And I started putting that plan into action, you know, and getting caught up on those student loans and just doing the paperwork. I mean, just doing the paperwork to tell them what had happened and why I wasn't paying my bills. And, you know, I filed bankruptcy when I got clean. I got divorced when I got clean. It was just a failure and a wreck. And, you know, I hadn't been married 4 times because I can't commit. But I certainly have had my share of failed relationships, you know. I know when I got clean, I used to say that I didn't like to get flowers. You know, don't waste your money on flowers. It's stupid. But really, I just didn't want to expect flowers and not get them. Right? So the reality is I love to get flowers. They're beautiful. Sometimes I buy them for myself and put them on my thing. And sometimes my lovely husband and Jerry send me flowers. And I love that. And I'm stopped lying to myself. You know, that's not true that I don't like to get flowers. It's not true that I don't want to wear a princess wedding dress. That's not true. I wanted to do that. But I said I didn't because that way if it never happened, I wouldn't be disappointed. So I met my husband 7 years ago when he drug his little tail into a meeting, and I had almost 3 years clean. So, oh no! I've learned my lesson. He was not a newcomer when we started dating. Anyway, he was like a hippie with no shoes and long hair, and I didn't like him anyway. He was like oatmeal, crunchy, you know, not my type. I watched him grow up, and you know, we eventually started dating, and I let him change me into a softer, kinder, more real person, you know, because I was an alleged badass. And And that wasn't true. You know, the truth of the matter was I wanted to be in love, and I wanted to have a fairy tale wedding, and I wanted to have a little baby. And I just didn't want to say it, because that way if it didn't happen, I wouldn't be disappointed. And so he asked me to marry him, and I said yes. And, you know, because of this program, I learned how to trust somebody enough with my heart, because that's something I had never done in those relationships, is really trust somebody. I mean, my mom had left, you know, my dad had left. So, you know, I might tell you I really trusted you and loved you, but I always had to keep some of that back, you know. And as a result of this program, I gave it all I had. And we got married, and first he asked me to marry him, then he asked me to change my last name, which I was very much against doing. And I said yes. And then he said, you know, he doesn't have any children. I have 2 wonderful boys. And he said, you know, he wanted to have a baby. And I said yes. You know, and so anyway, I kind of went off track. So I was thinking about being a nurse practitioner, and I believe very strongly in my recovery. That's all I'm here to do, is share my experience, strength, and hope. And I think that when I make a decision to do something and I start doing it, like let's say I'm going to come to the convention, and then like my car breaks down, I'm bankrupt, you know, there's no money in the bank, and all these things happen, then maybe I shouldn't go. You know, it's just that simple for me. And so that's kind of how my take on life is. When I just make a decision, to the best of my knowledge, it's the right decision for me. If I start getting a bunch of roadblocks, and I'm like, maybe this is not the way that I'm supposed to go. I don't know what God's will is, but I know it is not. And it's not for me to be miserable. It's not for me to be unhappy. So it's not for me to hurt other people and that sort of thing. So anyway, I thought I might be a nurse practitioner, and I started investigating some of that. I've got the student loans caught up, and then I just wanted to get a bachelor's degree, you know, and it took me another 5 years to get all the prerequisites, going to school part-time for all those years, being a part of Narcotics Anonymous, getting some leadership roles in Narcotics Anonymous. I finished my bachelor's degree last December. And I had to make a decision. Now, what do I want to do? Do I want to be a nurse practitioner? What do I want to do? And so I'm trying to decide and doing all this stuff, and my job. And I got offered a direct. You know, I talked to my family about it, my husband, because it's going to be different, a lot more work, you know, a lot more stress. And then I was like, I think, you know, my higher power gave me a gift of leadership. And as much as I want to fight against that, you know, that's why those things keep getting put in my life to do, is because that's what, I have that talent to do that. And so I took that job, and we decided to try to have a baby, which meant immediately having a baby. Lucky for us. And so, you know, we have a little girl, and she's 8 months old on the 22nd. And that's been a beautiful experience, you know, to go from being 17 and, you know, nobody even threw me a baby shower, you know, and to go from that to having this baby that is just so by everybody. You know, I wanted my kids, but nobody else did. I mean, my mom said, I thought you were taking a pill when I got pregnant at 17. I said, I thought I was too. I don't know. You know? I'm 16, for God's sakes. I don't know what I'm doing. But, you know, Narcotics Anonymous threw me a baby shower. You know, my work threw me too. You know, my family, my blood family didn't throw me any. I just can't say enough about this program and what it's done for me and what it can do for you. You know, if there's anything that you get out of this convention this weekend, I hope it's hope. You know, hope for a better life, not just to stop using drugs. That's really all I wanted. I just want to stop using drugs and stop having consequences. I didn't want to stop using drugs. I just want to stop having consequences around using drugs. I certainly didn't come in and say I want to be a better person. Have a baby. I certainly didn't say that. But that's what I got, and it's beautiful. And, you know, I've been able to buy a house and paint it any color I want to. And that's a big deal. You know, I didn't have that when I was little. You know, I've painted my son's room ninja red. Ask me how many coats of paint that takes to paint a white wall ninja red. And the other son's room is blue. And then I had this little girl, and the older son moved out, and so you know, I painted flowers all along the bottom of the blue wall and put clouds on it, and I made a nursery, you know, and that was just a big deal to me, to be able to do that for her. To be able to have a glider rocker. You know, I remember when I was pregnant with my son, that's all I wanted was just a damn glider rocker, you know, from TV. I guess I don't know what show I saw that show on, but, you know, I just was like, I just want to hold this baby in this rocker, put my feet up, and I didn't have it. You know, it didn't happen. I was lucky to get a crib for that baby, and I have a glider rocker. You know, my husband's mama bought it for me. It was like the best gift I've ever gotten. Sorry, Jerry. Except for those knives he just gave me for Christmas. Those are pretty freaking awesome. But you know, the relationships that I've been able to build since I've been here, like I said, I have some blood family, but we're just not close. My mom died of the disease of addiction almost 7 years ago. And, you know, I just kind of lost ties with my aunts and stuff like that. I try, but I don't try hard. You know, that's my fault. But because I have such a full life, you know, I've got Jerry, who walked me down the aisle, and is Papa Jerry to Bella, and all of you guys. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard for me to want nephews and cousins in NA. You know what I mean? Like, I put on Facebook that I'm going to Biloxi to spend New Year's Eve with 100 of my closest friends, and I meant it. Like, how lucky are we? I mean, I wanted to have friends. Like, I wanted to stop lying to people and tell them my mom was in the FBI. That's why I didn't live with her. You know, I mean, I was like a big liar. You know, because I just wanted to have friends, you know. And I mean, I have so many friends now, I can't even, like, you know, my phone got stolen in March or April. Anyway. And I have like 700 phone numbers in there. That's ridiculously insane. I mean, yeah, you know, I have security, I have comfort, you know, and some of that I got from you guys, and some of it I got from working the steps and just taking everything I could from this program, you know. And I hope, talking about doing his dissertation, all that, I remember him still pissing me off at area. Like, he was so involved in service work, even though he was doing all that school stuff. I'm not that good. I take a step back because of school, and I need to remember that, you know, I do need to make sure I give back everything to this program that I've certainly gotten. And I just wanted to say thank you guys for asking me to come and share a little bit of my hope with you. And I hope that if you're new, that you don't just look at people and, you know, think about, oh, they have some nice clothes and their hair's done and they look cute, and they can't relate to me, because I'm not like that. That is, buddy, we all should just have a shirt of what we look like when we got here that we have to wear to meetings, so that people would know how different it is. Thanks for letting me share.
All right, family, I would like for us to please give another round of applause for both of these people. Shared their lives with us.